Hi, I'm Courtney Armstrong. Welcome back. In the previous video, I talked about how trauma impacts the brain and how secure attachment can actually buffer the impact of trauma and help a child create the neural networks that they need for regulating emotions, help them feel like they can have healthy relationships, and have a bit of resilience about them. So let's talk about secure attachment first. Then we're going to talk about what happens when you don't have secure attachment growing up. So, what secure attachment is having a consistent caregiver, someone that you feel safe with, who can respond to you emotionally, can respond to your emotional needs. So, a lot of people feel like, I had a decent childhood because I had a roof over my head and food on the table. But if their emotional needs weren't validated or responded to, they can still grow up having some difficulties with self esteem, regulating emotions, and even in relationships. What everybody wants from their caregivers is nurturance, guidance, and protection. And if one or all of those things were missing, that can leave someone with a less than secure attachment. When we talk about insecure attachment, we generally divide it up into three different categories. The first category that I'm going to talk about is avoidant dismissive. When someone develops an avoidant dismissive attachment style, usually their caregiver was unavailable, critical, or rejecting when the child reached out for comfort or help or validation. And what these kids learn is to shut down their emotional needs. They feel like whenever they display a need for attachment or display an emotion, that the caregivers either ignored them, were not available, or criticized them for having those needs. So they learn to just shut that down. These children also become overly self reliant. They learn not to depend on anybody else, and they're suspicious of relationships. In fact, they want relationships, they want connection, but they don't let people generally get too close or help them. They don't show their emotions very much in relationships. So they can come off looking kind of cold, but deep down, they really aren't. These clients usually need to feel in control, and that includes in the therapy room with you. So it will be very hard for them to be vulnerable with you. They value their independence, so don't be surprised if they dismiss your suggestions or one up you, because it's hard for them to ask for help and they want to feel like they can do it themselves. There's a lot of shame that they have around having needs or needing other people or having feelings. So when you begin to connect with these clients, you often have to lead with logic and value their independence. They're not going to be very responsive, actually, to very warm, touchy-feely kinds of things. Actually, they do better with a lot of education. They actually may start out well with cognitive therapy, but as a lot of you who've trained with me know, cognitive therapy gets you so far, but until we get to the root of why something keeps occurring at the level of the emotional brain, some of those patterns won't change. So when you're working with these clients, just be patient and pace with them when it comes to emotional expression. It'll go slower than it might go with other clients, but the effort to get to know these clients is totally worthwhile because they want to feel good. They want to be functional. So they are motivated, but they just need to feel like there's a logical explanation for your interventions. They do very well with education about the brain and why you're doing the things that you're doing or teaching them some of the skills that you're teaching. Once they understand the logic behind it, they're more receptive to trying to do it. The second type of style I want to talk about is anxious or preoccupied attachment. What these people experienced was inconsistent responsiveness from their caregivers. So sometimes they felt like their caregivers were available, nurturing, protective, responsive, loving, and then that alternated with experiences when their caregivers were rejecting, critical, or dismissive. So what happens with these kids is they're just really confused. They tend to define themselves through other people. What these children generally learn is that I need to watch and engage the mood of the other person before I approach them, or they learn I need to learn how to please my caregiver and put my needs second to my caregiver's needs. Or they may have learned that I need to act out and exaggerate my emotions or be sick in order to get attention and love. They fear abandonment and rejection more than anything else, and they become preoccupied with how to keep the relationship. They get really anxious if they feel like someone's distancing from them. They may be prone to jealousy or codependence. They tend to enjoy therapy. So these clients generally seek out therapy, but they need a lot of validation and reassurance from us in the beginning. They're very sensitive to criticism. So if you start too early at pushing them to change or look at what they may be doing to contribute to a relationship problem, for example, then they can get angry or distant or begin to try to please you more. So what we have to do is first really understand their world and give them that nurturing and validation and attunement on a consistent basis that they didn't get as a child. And as they begin to develop that trust with us, then we can begin to gradually bring to their awareness where they could possibly alter their behavior, change expectations of others. That's what they actually need to learn eventually. We just have to be really careful not to shame them, but to let them know that we understand why this is hard for them, because growing up to get their needs met, they had to have fluid boundaries. They had to act out, or they had to put themselves second to their caregivers. With disorganized or unresolved attachment, as it sometimes is called, the caregiver is frightening, like abusive, or has, rageful outbursts in some way that it's scary. Or the caregiver could be traumatized themselves and not be able to take care of the child. So basically, these children, not only are their emotional needs not getting met, but their very survival needs feel threatened. They don't feel like they're in an environment where they're going to get fed properly or taken care of, or that the caregiver themselves is putting them in some kind of danger. So the child will feel an intense conflict between this drive to attach, because that's a biological drive we're all wired with, versus this need to protect themselves. So they really get stuck into kind of a push-pull in relationships. And you can even feel that in the therapeutic relationship. They also tend to have a confused sense of self. Their expectations are that other people will eventually harm them, betray them, or exploit them. So they long for attachment. They long to be loved and cared for, and to know that they matter and that they're important. But they also feel terrified that if they get too close, something terrible will happen. Stress disorients these clients. So while you might see the other attachment styles respond with anger or anxiousness when they get stressed, they may be more prone to fight or flight. Your avoidant or anxious clients with disorganized attachment, because that trauma started at an early age, they tended to dissociate or go into the freeze response or submit in order to survive in their environment. You're going to have to move slower with these clients because it's going to take them longer to trust you. And your number one priority, again, is to help them feel safe and to help them feel accepted, because they often feel crazy or that nobody will accept them, or they're afraid to tell us all the horrors that they've been through because they're not sure how we're going to handle it. And sometimes they may have had to become violent themselves in the past, or were a perpetrator in some way because this is what they were learning growing up. So it can be very hard for them to give us their full story in the beginning. I do not push or coerce these clients to do anything that they're not comfortable doing. So, for example, even if I am excited about showing them a hypnosis technique to regulate their emotions, if they look trepidatious about it, I'm certainly not going to present it that way. In fact, usually with these clients, I'll call it guided imagery. I'll encourage them to feel comfortable leaving their eyes open so that they can feel completely safe and in control of their experience. These clients also need a lot of education. They need education on trauma and how it impacts the brain to normalize their experiences. And they also need education about their emotional responses. These clients often know they feel bad or uncomfortable, but they're not always sure how to describe an emotional state because they didn't have anybody in their family of origin to really validate or clarify that for them. So in the beginning, it's just a lot of validation, acceptance, and education with these clients. And once you get that rapport with them, these clients may be the most challenging to work with in terms of, all their issues with trust, but they really value therapy. They stand to gain the most from us. So it's totally worthwhile to take your time and move at a pace that feels right for them. So that I'm going to stop right there today. I'm trying to keep these videos short because I know you're very busy. And what I'm going to do in the next video is I'm going to take this a little bit deeper and start going into some interventions you can use with these clients to help them begin to heal some of those attachment traumas and understand why they respond the way they do in relationships. Thanks for being here today, and hope to release the next video soon. And in the meantime, let me know what you think about these, if they're helpful to you or what else you'd like for me to talk about. You can comment in the comment box below this video. And of course, if you'd like more information about some of the things I'm talking about, you can head on over to my website, CourtneyArmstrong.net. Thanks.